why I feel in the face of all the problems in the world impotent, and why I somehow cannot manage to transform I. Now here we get to the real problem, because we're always telling each other that we should be different. Now, I'm not going to tell you that tonight. Why not?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream. I know it's a bit late, but it is the Memorial Day weekend, and, well, I have every right to go hiking on a holiday. So, no further ado, let's talk about Bitcoin and the continued parabola. Now, it is quite apparent we have had trend continuation, and by all means, a sustained parabola is, well, lo and behold, sustainable. And what is interesting is just how clean this meme line has been for the sustained move. And attempting to define a top based on, say, the 3.2 standard deviation, well, it's not really logical anymore. We did tag the 3.2 standard deviation at this location, and while we did have a short temporary top with a lateral move, trend continuation still happened, right? And what's lucky about this is we were able to quite clearly define our mean reversion pivot and define trend quite nicely. So unfortunately, I had a rather bearish bias, where I wanted to enter a short position instead of betting on trend continuation. Really, my prediction on this chart was either we will see trend continuation, which I do not want to bet on just because of how high risk this whole scenario appears to be, right? It is not pleasant betting on the greater fool fallacy for seeing just how high Bitcoin can go in a single breathless leap. And breathless really is the way to describe it. There has been very few opportunities for Bitcoin to really catch his breath in this location. And I still do have quite a bit of concern at just how painted, how perfect this bull flag is. Usually when we see something this clear and defined, it's usually followed by a good week of people screaming manipulation after it doesn't do what they wanted it to do. I can call to mind this textbook bull flag, if you will, where we had this beautiful, nice little compressing range. Magnificent. With a clean, clear breakout, and then, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but it did not work out the way everyone was expected to, right? The cleaner and more clear-cut the pattern, the less likely it should perform, at least in cryptocurrency. If you're trading stocks, absolutely. Bull flags, channels, accumulation zones, those are all going to work perfect for you in a nice, comfy, regulated market. Over here in cryptocurrency, if you're going to use them with a plus-size helping of caution on the side. The risk that really comes with betting that a parabola will continue going parabolic is questionable. So, instead of doing anything, I have been doing nothing. We have been taking a few nice altcoin long positions. Mithril was an excellent position these last few days, where we did finally catch that first take profit target. And then there was also, I can't even remember. Oh, BNB, that's it. Yeah, BNB hit my final take profit the other day. Wow, to the letter. Holy hell. Let's just point this out real quick. Nano stopped out, no doubt about it. Myth was great. ENG still in the buy zone. BNB, this bad boy. My goodness. Just sitting in BNB for a month, trying to figure out what Bitcoin is going to do. That was the right choice. We made 30% on this, right? We hit our final take profit target. My God, look at this. We hit our final take profit target to the number, right? And I'm going to point out why, because fundamentally, this is a fantastic chart, at least as far as volatility theory goes, right? If you were to turn off indicators and just look at, say, where would we define resistance on this chart? Actually, yeah, there is a lot of confluence on that value. Never mind. That's really nice. Yeah. No, I'm very fond of that. That's a great resistance line. I'm very impressed. Anyway, confluence. Right, our longest overexpanded period in this scenario was 350. So if we load up a 350 band, we'll be able to take a clean look at how this performed. Right, so we had a downward expansion, right, as defined by this and this generation of mass right here, which longest overexpanded period was 350. On its reentry, we identified that price will need to compress laterally as defined by the longest overexpanded distribution. So all that means is, as defined by the 1.25 standard deviation, which is the pivot point for the expansion or compression of a band, or of a distribution, excuse me, right? If we enter a state of compression from a state of overexpansion, it is viable that we will see the range respected like so, right? Where the top edge of the range and the bottom edge of the range will act as supports and resistances while the distribution sheds its mass. So, with this in mind, we just have a data set, and while mean reversion is implied, what's really happening is in the data set, price action will fill it, but it will not leave it. So mean reversion is often just a byproduct of that compression, right? Because if you have a large data set, what are the chances that all your data points are going to be in one half of the data set? Well, less probable than to say it would travel across the entire data set, which is why we have a take profit at the top, right? And that's also why sometimes mean reversion conditions fail, because the data set contains semi-random points of data, and who knows, they may be random after all. But it's more than possible to land your coin on heads or tails, let's say tails because it's the bottom side of the band, 10 times in a row, or maybe how many candles this is, right? Maybe it's going to land tails 60 times in a row. Who knows, right? The only thing that's probable is that it stays in the compressing distribution. So that brings us back to Bitcoin. Ooh, that's okay. So what's nice about this? If we have our 220 as our longest overexpanded period, we can define that state of expansion quite clearly, right? Where as long as we are outside of the 1.25 standard deviation of the longest overexpanded distribution, which was this pivot right here, which perfectly defines the trend, right? As long as we're outside that pivot, what happens? Trend is sustained to the upside because it has not entered a state of compression. The moment price would enter that 1.25 standard deviation, price would compress as defined by that compressing longest overexpanded period. So if price were to enter this band, price would trade laterally as defined by the band. Beautiful, right? So, quick note, we are tagging the 3.2 standard deviation, although there is technically a state of expansion. So really, we can't use extreme values to divine the swing high all that much because, well, trend is trend, and you don't bet against trend until, of course, trend is over. So at this time, longs slowly become higher and higher risk, and the mean reversion pivot for, well, a compressing distribution becomes higher and higher as well. So what's nice is that the aggressive upward slope of our mean reversion pivot forces price to continue trending upwards as well. And as long as Bitcoin performs well, so do altcoins. And I'm happy to say altcoin positions have been quite profitable this month. With that in mind, that's pretty much my entire train of thought for Bitcoin. Let's see if I can squeeze out any final points here on the shorter time frames. Perhaps 15 minutes so I can define a new longest overexpanded period and mean reversion pivot up here. What's important to note is... what's important to note? our longest overexpanded period, right? We can define that, and we can define our new mean reversion pivot on the shorter time frame, so we can define this short-term trend as well. At this current time, our longest overexpanded period is 300, so if I pop in 300 into this span right here, all right, well, same rules apply. We're going to get either a state of expansion or compression, depending on if it's inside or outside its 1.25 standard deviation. Quite obviously, we are in a state of expansion. So, and let's just look at the previous example of this so you guys can, know what I'm saying is accurate, right? The previous longest overexpanded distribution for the last significant move was 220, right? And that happened right here. So if we change this band to 220, beautiful. Nice. So what happens? If we are in a state of trend as defined by our longest overexpanded period, right here, what happens when price enters the 1.25 standard deviation? It compresses laterally as defined by that distribution. So as defined by this compressing data set, price will trade laterally, which means when the band is entered, it will stay in this range. And that's exactly what it did. And then price can only leave the band, the compressing distribution, when what happens? When it returns to a state of potential energy, which is returning below the 0.7 value. So if we take a look at this right here, this period, and we try to identify where it turns back below the 0.7 value, it's at this location. And what happens on this candle? Well, it looks like price breaks out of the band and sees a new state of expansion. Goodness gracious, I can't make this up. The exact same candle where we get significant compression and the restoration of a state of potential energy, trend resumes. Goodness gracious. And by trend, yes, it's not a very significant move, but what matters is it's a state of expansion as defined by the previous compressing range. So, with this in mind, what are we looking for now? Well, you can either attempt to buy on this mean reversion pivot here, right? Because any retest, anything above this value, oh, that's the wrong period. It's 300. I forgot to change it back. 300. So, any sustained state of expansion to the upside, right? Or we can either buy directly on this pivot, or we can short below the pivot. Those are our two options right now. Or better yet, we could short when we re-enter this band, and then, well, that would tie into the longer 4-hour mean reversion pivot down here. And any kind of downward mean reversion is probably going to crash Bitcoin. I just got to say that. But I certainly wouldn't recommend buying right now, I'll tell you that much. Though this is the... Wow, holy hell. This is quite the parabola. Really, the similarity between this and this is uncanny, I will be honest. That's something else. Well, let's check out the BLX, because I want to check our weekly distribution, just so we know. Right, because the name of this video is identifying whether or not this is the new bull run. Goodness gracious, any significant higher high would really start pulling some strings. You know, we really are just blowing past all the resistances, huh? Anyway, I would want to show you guys the weekly chart just to make the following point. So, do you notice how this bull run right here, right, 2015 bull run, what happened? It generated significant mass, right? Which is this red plume right here. When you generate that much mass, something needs to happen. Well, quite simply compression, which is these long overarching blue streaks, which restores the market to states of potential energy, right? And as long as that compression happens, price does this, just goes sideways, relatively sideways, right? But when we actually see these states of expansion again, that's when the next bull run begins. So it is not unreasonable to assume even the 3D Wave PM readings line up on this really nicely. That this here and this here are the same point. And let me explain why. As far as terms of distributional width go, we are still in a significant state of compression, right, as defined by both these periods. Even the bottom edges of our 50 distribution are super similar, right? Where, I'm going to show you guys this. This is beautiful, right? Where we have this compression of the 50 band like so, and this compression of the 50 band like so, right? And then we have the following period of downward expansion in both these instances, which causes the re-expansion of this band. And now we're seeing that same state of compression and compression. So, it's uncanny on the similarities. It happened far faster than I anticipated, which is why I missed out on the majority of this move. But it's still reasonable to believe we will see this final end of compression throughout here, right? And let me point something out. Where this move happened, I would like you to look at the 3D Wave PM reading right here, okay? Our longest overexpanded periods have only just begun to enter a state of compression at this time. Right through here. And astonishingly enough, we are in that same state of compression right now on Bitcoin. And that's why I believe these moves are so similar. And better yet, we have the expansion of the shorter term distribution, which I will also point out to you. With regular Wave PM, oh my God, guys. Okay, so do you see this aggressive downward slope on our longer periods for regular Wave PM? I'll just call it Wave PM, right? 50 band is compressing and our 100 band compressing, and it is implied that the 200 band is compressing as well, as you can see. So we have all this net compression happening at this location. Same thing happening here. All this net compression happening at the same location. And what do we have? We have the textbook Wave PM cross. Our shorter term distributions are expanding over our longer term distributions in both these scenarios. So even the readings are identical. It's uncanny. So 3D Wave PM paints the exact same picture in both scenarios. And regular Wave PM implies that upward expansion. So I do expect an eventual rejection, and followed by this super tight compressing range. This is what in Wyckoff theory is known as reaccumulation. And honestly, my new prediction, I don't think we're going to go back and test the weekly 200 anymore. I don't. What I expect now is a period of reaccumulation, of final compression before re-expansion. Okay? So, in terms of, will this go down to the weekly 200 again, or will it continue trend after a long period of compression? You know, I would rather bet on the latter, where this is going to enter a long period of reaccumulation. Okay? Because we have the same re-expansion of those shorter periods over the longer period distributions. And now all we need is the recompression of the shorter distributions, right? So watch this. I believe we're going to get identical readings on Wave PM. We have all this aggressive compression on our higher periods. The shorter term period has a volatility pop to the upside before returning to a state of compression, which I believe to happen here as well. Right? When the 14 period moves down like this, that means short-term lateral trading. So And that can actually be confirmed on the shorter time period mean reversion pivots. Right? Because once we enter those shorter term mean reversion pivots, Bitcoin will be in a state of compression for a very long time because of the amount of generated mass. And, well, as we learned before, compression means lateral range trading. And if we have a lateral range, that's simply reaccumulation. It has been a pleasure, folks. I will talk to you later. Whew, that was quite the rant. Okay. Oh, God, I hope this uploads. I put a lot of effort into this idea. Little Snitch is having a problem. Oh, network filter's off. Okay, it should be fine. Beautiful. Very nice guy. Okay, it's just because it was 20 minutes, eh? All right, well, that was a really fun rant. I think that's going to be it. Yeah, it was just a super in-depth Bitcoin analysis, and I'm very happy with it. So it has been a pleasure, folks. I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great day.